we interrupt what would normally be our intro to our episode with a addendum to the episode that's coming in the front. Basically, Geoff and I take you behind the curtain. I just finished recording a High Hand Theory episode. It's a great episode. You should stick around and listen to it. And then we saw this tweet from Steve Popper talking about reports that suggest whispers around the league have begun to speculate on the possibility of the Knicks moving Towns. Sounds like there's potentially some traction here. Could be nothing, but there's teams, and it's not just Giannis, looking like Memphis, Orlando, and Charlotte are possibilities. And we just thought we needed to come back and talk about this. And this will serve as our intro for the episode. Geoff, I always make you do the hard work, the hard labor up front. And now you got to do it twice in an episode. What are your initial thoughts, even if they're all over the place? This is going to be our instant reaction to thinking about this concept. What are your initial thoughts immediately?
Yeah, this is all over the place. A good way to describe them. I mean, I'm even wearing different clothes, like just throwing everyone for a loop. You know, I did not expect to be doing this after we just recorded a rather long and thorough episode. Like that was one of the best episodes I think we've ever made. And it was just weird jumping back into it, which is great. I'm going to maybe disappoint some people here because I truthfully, I don't have any hot takes. One very, very, well, I try to be consistent in most aspects, but perhaps the most consistent I've been in Knicks analysis is that I think at this point, the Knicks front office has earned Knicks fans' trust. And I think they'd be making a mistake to not do their due diligence on pretty much any player. Like, okay, if you're going to say Brunson, hands off Brunson, yeah, I get that. He's faced the team, the captain. All right, that's fine. But for the most part, like keeping your ear to the wall and just hearing what people have to say, because look, you and I are two of the higher people on Karl-Anthony Towns in general, or maybe two of the people in Knicks verse or whatever you have to say, but he's not perfect. He's not untouchable. It's not like you can't, with all the money he's making, you can't turn him into something better. So I think everybody should be open to the idea that the Knicks could maybe turn Karl-Anthony Towns into something that fits better, something that, whether it's in a Moneyball way, you know, the sum of the parts, a couple players who can together bring more than Karl-Anthony Towns brings by himself, help the depth, help different areas. Like, it would be a mistake to not see what's out there and see what people might give up for him. But insofar as judging something that hasn't happened yet before it happens, you're not going to get that from me, because a Towns trade could range from awful to great. It just depends on what they get back for him. And that's really the bulk of what I have to say about it as of right now, until something actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, all of that's very measured and fair. I would just say, as far as trading Towns, to me, it really comes down to, like, if there is really some friction in the locker room, something that can't be resolved, something that's going on where these guys don't want to play with each other, and it seems to potentially be influencing Towns in terms of his ability to perform on the court, like shooting. And we'll talk about this in the episode, specifically how poorly he's shooting, how abnormal it is relative to the rest of his career. And if there are issues there, we've heard Mike Brown's comments on Towns, kind of like the team not seeming to have his back with the Draymond Green stuff, all of the stuff that's going on. And there's just irreconcilable differences. It would make sense to move Towns and do it as soon as possible. Like that is just a reasonable thing to do. And if that's the case, they should try to, like you said, Geoff, get the best package they possibly could for him. If we're thinking about these particular teams, we're talking about a package that would probably, from the Magic, be headlined by Desmond Bane, from the Grizzlies be headlined by Jaren Jackson Jr., from the Hornets, I don't think they can make it work unless we're talking about the impossible, which I know we're not talking about the impossible here, of the Knicks acquiring LaMelo Ball. And the Knicks would not be interested in the Miles Bridges, of it all. So I don't think that's going to happen. So regardless, there are some packages that could potentially make the Knicks better, with these teams. I will say right now, Knicks fans, if you get Jaren Jackson Jr., you thought you didn't like Karl-Anthony Towns, you're going to have problems with Jaren Jackson Jr., but he is a great player and great defensively, and that solves some of the problems. We're talking about the Magic. We're talking about like Desmond Bane and potentially some other support, either Goga Batadze, Wendell Carter. So there are some packages that could make the Knicks potentially better if they could figure out how to make it work. And I think, like Geoff said, they need to explore those things. Karl-Anthony Towns is not a perfect player. I think he should work theoretically at an elite level with this team. But if there are some personal things that are going on that are preventing it from happening, then it just make sense to move on from him. Any last thoughts just before we head to the main episode?
I just want to say, and this is very uncharacteristic of me, that whole thing with Draymond Green and then Mike Brown afterwards, that was like complete and utter bullshit. That was complete nonsense. And one of the most jarring things to me is that like there are Knicks fans who are like, well, if Towns was just tougher, like he brings this on himself. Dude, let's just say everything that Towns' biggest haters say about him is true. Like he's soft, he whines too much, whatever you want to say. Does not mean the shit that is being said about him is just suddenly okay. That's ridiculous. And this is an area where I feel very strongly that Towns actually has a gripe. Like if he's looking around and there's this guy on the Warriors who is just relentlessly bullying and attacking him, like just relentlessly, and his teammates are being all buddy-buddy with him, his coaches are being buddy-buddy with him, his coach in the press conference criticizes him. Like if you're Towns, you're probably looking around like, what is going on here? Am I not on this team? Am I on a different team and I just don't know it? Like I feel very, very surprised about that. There's just any discrepancy in the perspectives here, that there are people who are like, yeah, I don't like him, so people can do whatever they want to him. That doesn't make any sense. Like there's no consistent logic to that. There's just no rationale for it. It's very, very wrong. And if, of course, we don't have all the information, maybe Towns is a problem behind closed doors. Maybe he's an annoyance in the locker room, whatever the case. I'm just saying, given the available information we have right now, I think Towns would have a certain gripe. And that's something, whether Towns stays or whether he goes, they're going to have to address in some way. Whether if Towns is just, screw this, like these guys don't have my back, I don't want to be here anymore, then they have to address it through a trade and they have to get the best package they can. If the front office looks at the available packages and says, we're not going to get enough back, we're not trading you, this is something the head coach has to fix. He has to look at his best players and say, we can't go on like this. This chemistry is unacceptable. This needs to be fixed now. So you have to have self-awareness about the situation, about maybe who messed up and who is in the wrong here. Maybe both sides have to give a little bit. But if Towns is here to stay, that this is something that's going to have to be addressed.
Incredible points. All totally right. If he is staying as a Knick, it must be resolved. Like you can't go forward with things like this. And if it's irreconcilable, then he must be traded before the deadline. There's no middle ground here. It's one or the other. And to your point about the Draymond Green situation, in any situation where, obviously, playing in high school, for myself, playing in intramural basketball in college, if I have a teammate who is, let's say Karl-Anthony Towns is soft or he's meek and he's more timid or however people describe him, if that's the case and somebody is messing with my teammate who is like that and he doesn't want the smoke, guess what? I'm taking up the smoke on his behalf 100% of the time. And if you don't have a teammate who's doing that for you, there's a big problem. That's a big problem. That's the most outwardly easily visible sign of a major issue. Like we've heard the reports, from Fred Katz and James Edwards and other stuff, but that's the most obvious outward showing of an issue potentially behind the scenes, just the way that nobody kind of stuck up for him. And beyond that, really kind of put it in his face that they weren't going to, and that it didn't matter what his perspective or feelings were on the situation. So it's really unfortunate.
It was like Deuce McBride, who makes nothing. Like he's the lowest paid player on the roster. He's the youngest player. He's the smallest player on the roster, probably besides Brunson. He was like looking around like the football player, and him came out like, "Are we gonna take this?" He said something to Draymond, and then everyone else was like, "Nah, we're good."
Yeah, that's really unbelievable.
That was crazy. I couldn't believe it when I was watching it, and it seems like most Knicks fans are in agreement that was, even some of the ones who just don't like Towns were just like, how could it have gotten to this?
So if it's in fact to the point where it's irreconcilable, then Knicks fans, you should expect the trade for Towns. And although this is just rumors and just like speculation and whispers around the league, to quote Popper's article, this is going to have smoke attached to it and potentially fire if there is really stuff going on behind the scenes and it can't be resolved with Mike Brown, the leaders of the team, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Karl-Anthony Towns can't all figure it out, then this is something that's probably in store. With that said, definitely stick around and listen to the rest of the episode. Like Geoff said, it was an incredible episode. We went very deep. It was very comprehensive, and hope you enjoy it. This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, I'm joined by my brilliant co-host, Geoff. And Geoff, we have some big trouble in the Knicks world right now. The Knicks are seemingly, at least from a Knicks fan standpoint, hopefully hitting absolute rock bottom on the season right now. And I believe that Knicks fans want two things. They want to, one, vent their frustrations, and they know they can do that in our comments, and we'll reply to all of them and engage with whatever their thoughts and opinions are, especially if somebody has any insightful takeaways that they like to share. We'd love that. And two, they want answers. They want to understand what is happening, why is this happening, and maybe there's a third thing they want, and that's reassurance that this is not the path that this team is going to take throughout the rest of the season. Is this a lost season? Has everything broken down? Has what we saw in the first, couple of months of the season, was that just a mirage and this is the real team? What is happening? Because it doesn't look good. There's no way around that. We know that for sure. Geoff, my brilliant co-host, I'm going to leave it to you to let me know where we're going to start and what's going on with the Knicks and how do we give this reassurance to our audience unless there is none to be had.
I was trying to figure out what to talk about, and I was just like glancing at my computer screen, and I had Jordan Walsh's Dunks and Threes page up. So thanks for that. As I was like, where do we go?
It's like, so about those Celtics.
Yeah. The thing is there are so many places to start. There's no sacred cows right now for this team. And it's a weird time throughout the NBA. I guess that's one place I would start for reassuring Knicks fans. There is not a happy fan base right now in the league. Maybe like OKC, maybe Detroit. There are like two or three teams that they feel like they're being maximized and feel like they're in a good place and just kind of cruising. But Philadelphia, Orlando, Cleveland, like the East is just Boston fans are probably happy. Boston's definitely overachieving relative to perception, but everybody's just kind of going through something right now. And, we just need to go down the list of the Knicks. I feel strongly that Jalen Brunson, this is his first game back. I think he's not been his best self. Obviously, God knows everybody said something about Karl-Anthony Towns. Karl-Anthony Towns can't make a shot inside 2 feet. Doesn't seem to shoot threes anymore. Like, I don't know what's going on with Towns. Josh Hart, it was his first game back. He has some saving grace, but we could look at the starting lineup. That's somewhere we could start. The starting lineup that for whatever reason, they're still trying to make work against every single shred of evidence in this past game against Dallas. The starting lineup played 11 minutes, lost by double digits, put the team in a hole in every time they were out there. the starting lineup with Deuce McBride or Mitchell Robinson played a combined 0 minutes. So we could start there. To be honest, though, XJ, I think. Oh, I forgot to mention Mike Brown and the front office. Like we could start with Mike Brown, but we're gonna get to that. So to be honest, XJ, I think where I'd like to start is with Mikal Bridges, and I'm gonna sort of tie him with OG Anunoby, but I know you have a couple things you want to say about him, so I'm gonna leave him. But I think the whole idea of this starting lineup is you have these two guys in Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns who are undoubtedly elite offensive players who should fit together quite well because of the shooting and the skill and the way they play. And what the front office tried to do is surround them with as much shooting and defense as possible, guys who can be additive, a word we've said many, many times about these two players. And I just don't think they are holding up their end of the bargain at all right now for this franchise. And it's kind of a weird starting point because I do think that you want to start with the coach, you want to start with the strategies, you want to start with your best players. But I think that the general idea of this team is that Bridges and Anunoby, more than any other two players on the team, are supposed to have this symbiotic relationship with Towns and Brunson, where not only can they thrive with Brunson and Towns in their maximal roles, but they can elevate Brunson and Towns in ways that other players can't, whether that's off the ball, whether that's with elite defense. And I just am not seeing any of that on either end of the court. I think they've been really, really disappointing as of late. And I think they're pretty quietly the key to the Knicks turning around. I think that when you see Bridges and Anunoby playing closer to their potential in a more additive way, it'll all just kind of start to fall back into place.
I think that's a totally reasonable place to really kind of hone in on, because I don't think that's what's being talked about for the most part. I think what's being talked about for the most part is part of the things you touched on, Mike Brown and his coaching, and kind of seemingly going from doing all the right things to doing all the wrong things. Karl-Anthony Towns, who we all know is the biggest punching bag scapegoat for the Knicks, and he's not honestly given Knicks fans anything to not do that about, because he's been awful, like you mentioned. Even Jalen Brunson, with some of the different stylistic approaches that he's had, and he hasn't really been great. And so it's interesting that you point that out, the basically the two wings and what their role in all this is. And I think it's a reasonable place to start, because I don't think it's being talked about. And I think those two are really, in a weird way, like obviously we know Brunson and Towns are going to be the engines of the offense. Those two are supposed to be what makes this all work. Like the reason you go get Karl-Anthony Towns is you make this evaluation and you say, we got a guy who reputationally at least is not a good defensive player. He's going to play at the 5. We're not going to have good rim protection theoretically with Karl-Anthony Towns here. He's probably going to play the center. If not, it's going to be some combination of Towns and Mitch. Mitch, we know, has health issues repeatedly throughout his career. So all of this comes down to, we have these two wings. They're going to insulate Jalen Brunson. They're going to insulate Karl-Anthony Towns. They're going to make all of this possible. And really, from that standpoint, it is the core of the team. They have to be able to hold up defensively on the backs of those two wings. And you talked about Bridges, and then you highlighted OG Anunoby. It's going to be a shock to some people to hear this. I think OG Anunoby has been extremely disappointing this season. And I think he's probably, you and I were like chatting a little bit before it, and we were like, who do we think Knicks fans are most upset about before this, given this recent stretch? 2-9 since December 31st, and just brutally awful defense, much worse offense than he had been playing. One of the worst teams in the league over that course of time. Who do we think Knicks fans are going to blame the most or be most upset with? And I said, yeah, I think it's probably Mike Brown. I think it's Karl-Anthony Towns. You said Bridges and OG, and I said, OG, you think Knicks fans are upset with OG? And I was like, I don't think any Knicks fans even are thinking about OG as like a problem here. And I'm curious if you want to leave a comment, if you've thought that at all. But OG Anunoby's defense has gone from a place where this guy is a scary defender, a guy who's on the court who we talked about. He can help one pass away, stunt, and then recover. The ball swings to the guy who was guarding one pass away, and then he guard that guy and create a turnover and just creating havoc defensively, basically allowing you when the Knicks had Isaiah Hartenstein, if Isaiah Hartenstein and OG Anunoby were on the court together, that's an elite defense. It doesn't matter who the other three are. It's irrelevant. It could be 3 Jalen Brunsons. You have OG Anunoby, you have Isaiah Hartenstein. It's an elite defense. That's partially, obviously, Isaiah Hartenstein, as we've come to know, is one of the best defensive centers in the league. But that's in large part because OG Anunoby was so good, and he has not been that for quite some time, and definitely not this season. And so you might say, well, can you blame a guy for going from elite to being like very, very good? Yeah, that's what you need from him on this team. Unfortunately, that's how you built the team. You built the team where you have the 2 wings, and those are the center pieces of your team defensively. And if they aren't great, if they aren't elite at what they're supposed to be doing, this team's going to fall apart. Offensively, OG's been a problem as well. Purely from the standpoint, in my opinion, I don't know, he's effectively forgotten how to shoot. He's been awful at shooting the ball. I think it was 30%. I thought I wrote it down, but I don't have it in front of me. I think he's shooting 30% from 3 the last 15 games. Shooting has dropped off a cliff. Early in the season, he was shooting red hot, 40% from 3. Apparently, he talked to Dirk Nowitzki about shooting. Nowitzki told him, oh, you got to shoot the split finger as opposed to letting it release off your index or your middle finger. And then that erased OG's ability to shoot the ball. Because he's not shot the ball well for a long time, and his defense hasn't been on that elite level, that kind of standard that we've known of OG Anunoby, potentially the best perimeter defender in the league, all NBA defense, going to contend for defensive player of the year at some point. It hasn't been that. And that's been a problem. If you're listening to this, you may think, well, there's other issues going on, Mike Brown, and we're going to talk about all that. But I think it's important to start here because there are some things that are going under the radar. And we're trying to think, okay, before December 31st, this team was 23-9, elite offense, top 3 offense in the league, a top 3 net rating in the league. They were just an incredible team, hitting threes at a ridiculous clip. I think they were shooting 39% from 3. And we're dominating the league. And then you talk about from December 31st till now, and it's the complete opposite. What has changed? And in my opinion, not only has OG Anunoby's shooting fallen off a cliff, but his defense hasn't been there either. And that goes for both wings. And that's just going to be necessary for the Knicks to be who we believe that they can be.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about OG Anunoby is that in theory, he should be scheme proof and he should be coach proof, because a guy like Anunoby, the way he helps you, the numerous ways he helps your team should be just always there. They should be evergreen. When he's not a super high variance shooter. He's never been on the scale of 3-point shooting, which is a high variance venture in general. He's been fairly consistent throughout his career as a good shooter, especially from the corners where he's elite. His defense, while you can make it better or you can suppress it with certain ways of playing. You touched on this brilliantly a couple days ago on Twitter when you talked about how the whole Knicks defense is hurt by the fact that they basically treat Brunson with kid gloves and don't let him play defense on his own. And all of a sudden, the ways OG Anunoby can help you are suppressed by him constantly having to be in rotation unnecessarily. So there are things you can do to suppress his defense, but his general impact is chaotic. He is amazing off the ball. He jumps passing lanes. He's just a one-man off-ball wrecking crew in the same way that maybe a Draymond Green is. I don't think that anybody could take Draymond Green and make him not a really great defender. I think he would just do that. And so my point is that when you're looking at these things, we looked at Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns last season and saw them coming up short offensively in terms of what they were doing together, their overall impact, the team output. And there were some buttons that could be pressed in terms of, well, they're not doing these things, and these are purely tactical decisions that they're shying away from. This is why we started there. And don't believe me, there are things Mike Brown is not doing that we're going to talk about in about 10 minutes, and we're going to talk about them. But when it comes to OG Anunoby, he is not being suppressed by the system he's in. He's not being stepped on or held back in any way. He's not making shots. He is dying on screens like Mikal Bridges is. When you have two guys in Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby who are elite defenders or supposed to be elite defenders for this whole thing to work, and neither one of them can get over a screen, that's a problem. That's not the coach's problem. That is a player's problem. Something within them is not allowing them to be their best selves at this present moment. And it is on the player to find out how to find that version of themselves again. And so when you talk about OG Anunoby, just look down the line at what he's doing. Higher turnover percentage than assist percentage. Okay, his role isn't to create offense. He's a shooter off the catch, but he's turning it over too much. The defense is 0.1 points per 100 possessions better when he doesn't play. Does that sound like OG Anunoby to you? No, he is an impact god. And going back to his days in Toronto, he's just not OG Anunoby that we know. And the truth of the matter is, what we're about to talk about going forward with Mike Brown, again, very real things, very rotation problems that resemble what the Knicks were going through last season. But I give you my word that if OG Anunoby doesn't clean it up, it'll be all for naught. He has to be his best self for this to work.
It's a great summary of why we're talking about OG Anunoby and why you're listening to this and you're like, your first comments are about OG Anunoby. It's a great summary because, like you said, he should be scheme proof. He should be insulated to whatever, mistakes are happening with Mike Brown's coaching approach. He should be insulated to whatever's happening with Karl-Anthony Towns not making shots or all of these various things that are happening. And that's why I mentioned the OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein thing, because that should be OG Anunoby is essentially, along with a good rim protecting center or another great defensive wing like Mikal Bridges, that should be enough to anchor a defense, a very good defense, if not a great defense. And it is nowhere near that right now. And obviously you mentioned there's much more to talk about, and we'll talk about Mike Brown because I do want to say, like, it's really unfortunate timing of when we last talked about the Knicks, when, I was saying at that point, Mike Brown probably couldn't have done a better job. Like I thought that he was. Would
you actually say that he was inevitable?
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring up the inevitable thing, but if you know, Geoff might have said that, the Knicks are inevitable to do all the right things and pull all the right strings all the way to the bank, not that they would win necessarily, but that they would make the right moves. And I don't think since he's uttered those words, they've made a single right move.
They haven't made a single right move. And the thing is, actually, I would have tried to, I'll be honest with the audience. I would have probably tried to sweep it under the rug and just hope nobody noticed. If this was closer to the start of our show when you didn't know me as well. But we've had so many conversations, whether it's text or on here, like, me so well that you had the wherewithal in that episode to say, well, wait a second here. What do you really mean? Because, like, we have so many conversations where you're like, okay, I want to respond, but I want to make sure I know what's fully baked into your brain before I actually respond. So, like, if you go back and watch the episode, you know what I actually meant. It was unfortunate wordage, but you're right. Even within the exact context of what I meant, in terms of it is inevitable that they will try stuff and they will, experiment with lineups and with strategies. To swing it back to you, pretty much since that point, they have done the opposite, which is very Costanza of me as the bit continues.
Very sadly, in a dark comedy Costanza kind of way. I would say this. You mentioned the starting lineup, and this is something we were definitely going to talk about. There's no way we're going to talk about this. There's only one thing that we knew coming into this season. I would say knowledge is very hard to come by in the NBA. Man, there's so many things happening. There's so many moving parts. There are so many variables. It's really hard to know things for sure. You can strongly feel things. You can have strong evidence for things, But to say like, man, we kind of know this, that's a really high bar. And Geoff knows anytime we talk about something, if he uses anything that sounds definitive, I'll be like, I don't know about that. Do we know that? There's something that we essentially know. And it's that the Knicks starting lineup with Josh Hart in it is not the best lineup that the Knicks have to offer the NBA. And the reason why we know that, we have someone to thank. We can thank Tom Thibodeau to know that you can play a lineup 2,000 possessions, which is in statistical terms, typically we get to like a 500 possessions mark for a lineup. We can say like we kind of feel confident about what this lineup can be. We get to like 750 possessions. We can say, yeah, I mean, it's it's unlikely this is going to change much. We get to 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. This is what the lineup is. 2,000 possessions across different contexts, different times of the season, different opponents, regular season, postseason. It is a mediocre lineup. That we know that now. Mike Brown, if you want to come in and say, hey, I think I saw a couple things strategically, tactically that they haven't done, obviously, like maybe we'll get Josh Hart to shoot 40%. He did from 3. And it's still not good. It's not good. I talked about experimentation. Geoff talked about experimentation. It's something we talked about all last season, relentlessly, how important it is. This is not experimentation at this point. This is beating a dead horse. This lineup is not the lineup. Move on from the lineup. Either go to Mitchell Robinson, either go to Deuce McBride, either go to Landry Shamet, go to something. There's no reason for this season there to be, along with the starters, the token starters, which we can talk about, like everything's on the table. So it's not, I don't think it should just be token anymore that it's Brunson, Bridges, OG Towns are the 4 starters plus whoever. I think that we can be open to some other ideas at this point. Not saying that we should be, but we should go in a different direction. But from the Knicks, analysis standpoint, there should be some open pages there in terms of which way you can go. But let's just say Brunson, Bridges, OG Towns. There's no reason why Josh Hart should be the most played 5th guy when we just saw that for 2,000 possessions. What much more? How many more possessions do you need to see before you know that this is not the direction to go? 275 possessions of Josh Hart with those guys, plus 1.9 so far in the season. Worse than last season. I'm sure if it played another 2,000, it'd get up to what it was last season, which is like plus 5, I think it was, or whatever it was, 50% on the NBA. Deuce McBride, 188, plus 4.8. It's better in a tiny sample. We need to see it more. Landry Shamet, 113 with those guys, plus 0.0. Not enough possessions to really know anything about it. Mitchell Robinson with those guys, 101 possessions, plus 10.1. I talked about this before the season. Obviously, I believe Deuce McBride with the starters is the best lineup that the Knicks have to offer. Should be their most played lineup. We've had 2 seasons where it's been possible, and it's played less than like 300 total possessions across the 2 seasons. So somehow, like miraculously, in a really negative miracle sense, it has not crossed the 300 possession boundary, while the other lineup has played 2,000 possessions. But it's fine. If you don't think that's the best one, okay, let's see Mitchell Robinson. They started the season with Mitchell Robinson next to Karl-Anthony Towns. Some people didn't agree with it because they said, well, Mitchell Robinson, if he plays next to Towns, then he can't play, without Towns for a while. I was like, I don't think that's a problem, because if this is the lineup you're going to play in the playoffs, then play it and see how it works. And let's see if this should be it. So it's fine. If you don't think it's Deuce, I think it's Deuce. Geoff thinks it's Deuce. If you don't think it's Deuce, play Mitchell Robinson. Stop showing me the same Josh Hart lineup that's played 2,000 possessions now going on 2,300. Like, it doesn't make sense. And that's not experimentation. That's bad coaching, objectively bad coaching. And it needs to stop now.
Yeah, that was an unbelievable rant. Like, I'm just sitting here and I was just enjoying it because it's great analysis. And I think Knicks fans will really appreciate it. I think you're echoing what a lot of people's frustrations with Brown are, which is like, if you were going to move on from Tom Thibodeau, who we were joking before the show, Tibbs is the best Tibbs there is. Like, you're not going to be like, oh, well, we kind of liked what Tibbs was doing, but we're just going to find like a slightly better. No, Tibbs was the best Tibbs. And if you wanted the things Tibbs was bringing you, then firing him was nonsensical. The reason that I thought that moving on from Tibbs was defensible, and what we argued at the time, is that his style, the things he was doing, there was a ceiling to it. There was a ceiling to some of his limitations brought along with it a ceiling. And if you were going to move on, that was a departure from those things. If you were going to hire Mike Brown, who was going to come in and just do and see the things that Tibbs saw, then it was a nonsensical decision because it introduced friction. It potentially introduced a chemistry upset within the locker room, things we knew were good at the time. You have to, there's an assumption at the time that Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Karl-Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, these guys were on board. We want to win a championship. We love Tibbs, but let's hear a different voice. We understand what you're trying to do. But if Mike Brown is going to come in and be like, hey, you know what? Yeah, this starting lineup, same thing. Let's just throw it out there. And guess what, XJ? Guess who leads the NBA in points per possession on cuts? The New York Knicks, 1.5 points per cut per shot finished by a cut this season. Guess who was last place in frequency of cuts? The New York Knicks, 4%. That's not experimentation. That's not increased tactical improvement or whatever you'd want to say. This is not a departure from last season. This is more of the same. You have to lean into the things that the whole reason you were brought in is to do things differently. And bring it back to the starting lineup. One thing I want to add about the starting lineup, because you and I have multiple times rolled the tape from our first episode when Karl-Anthony Towns was a Knick before the season. We have that 5-minute clip of you and I going back and forth and just being like, you can't start Josh Hart. You can't start Josh Hart. Here's why. And the reasons that I gave at the time were the Knicks only had 3 wings and spacing. Those are the 2 things that I really, really honed in on. And I remember you at the time off air when we talked about it, because you were really complimentary of me at the time. You even on air said something like, I hadn't even thought about that. Maybe Tibbs will go for it. But off air, you were like, dude, that was a really good rant. One thing I would add to it is that I think we're just going to find out that Deuce McBride is just better. Deuce McBride is the 4th best Knick at worst right now. At worst, he is the 4th best Knick. There's just no reason that he should not be playing you should not give him the possibility to play the most possible minutes with all combinations. We have a career sample size of everybody he plays with getting better. You want to say that Towns and Brunson don't work together because they're both bad at defense and they, blah, 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 blah. Brunson's not a good enough passer and Towns can't create his own shot. Put Brunson next to Deuce and Towns. They outscore opponents by almost 12 points per 100 possessions across 2 seasons. Deuce McBride needs to start, in my opinion. Sorry, let me rephrase that, because I agree with you. You could try Mitch. That lineup will be fine. But the thing is that I think the Knicks are light at wing. The Knicks are light with big men. I think if they don't make a change at the trade deadline or an upgrade at the trade deadline, they're going to go into the postseason with 2 big men that they trust. Saw it against the Mavericks. That right now, Yabusele's out of the rotation. They've got 2 big men. And so, to me, bringing Mitch off the bench just makes that stagger a little bit easier. It just makes it, you can play Towns and Mitch together somewhat, but it's just a lot easier to make sure one is on the court at all times. Similarly, the Knicks are very, very light at wing. Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Josh Hart are your 3 best and probably 3 primary guys you want playing small forward and power forward. They have sneakily good guards that they can play. They have a little bit more guard depth. You bring Deuce McBride off the bench next to Landry Shamet. Kolek hasn't been playing well recently. I think if Kolek is the 9th man and he gets more consistent minutes, he'll start to play more like he was playing when he was getting consistent minutes when Brunson was out earlier. Kolek has not been good, but I don't think, you jerk him around across 100 minutes. God, that wordage was not great. I think it's easy to just, be a little bit more inconsistent when you're young and your minutes and role are flip-flopping like that. Point is, you have a solid 9-man rotation, and the rotation becomes a lot easier with Deuce McBride as the 5th starter. The spacing becomes better. We talked about the screen navigation and the point of attack defense. Deuce McBride is your best point of attack defender. He's your best screen navigator. So many boxes get checked by just sticking him in the starting lineup. Now all of a sudden, who's our best wing off the bench? Oh, we've got Josh Hart. Amazing 6-man. I think he'd be the sixth man of the year, one of the front runners if he had just been the sixth man all year and had committed to the role. Okay, our big man depth is a little light. Well, Mitchell Robinson's on the bench. Oh, well, now we've got a pretty great big man rotation. You can build a championship rotation with Deuce McBride in the starting lineup. And how is that not where you start at this point? The fact that they went back to that lineup out of the second half down 28 was egregious to me. Just absolutely egregious. After they got smoked to open the game, they get smoked by the Dallas Mavericks, who don't have Anthony Davis, don't have Derek Lively, don't have Daniel Gafford. D'Angelo Russell's getting DNP coaches' decisions. Like, I'm not saying that the Mavericks stink. I'm not saying that their players are bad. Cooper Flagg is unbelievable. Like, and he's only 18 years old. It's silly. But this Knicks team, there are, just like last season, there are no excuses for them not to be championship contenders this season. And if this keeps up, it is going to be an indictment on how Mike Brown has tried to replace Tom Thibodeau. And by adverse effect, or by transitive nature, whatever you want to say, this is on the front office. The front office is who is going to answer for this, because Mike Brown was the guy they chose. They looked at a good situation and said, we can make it better with this. And right now it is not happening.
It's a great bottom line to it. And I agree with everything you said, and I think you made incredible points throughout. To add to some of it, in terms of Deuce starting, there's issues with identity in terms of what your identity is as an organization, as a team. It's totally unclear. Starting Deuce helps resolve a lot of that. You have clear identities because you say, we're going to start Deuce. We're going to go with spacing. We're going to go with shooting. We're going to go with cutting. We're going to have 5 guys out. We're going to pull rim protectors away from the rim. The Knicks, if we think about this, what's different? What's different from their start, to in terms of how they started until, like I said, December 31st from December 31st to now? Like, what is different in those situations? The rim frequency. The Knicks were getting 31% of their shots at the rim early in the season. Now, this most recent stretch, 27.6. Pretty significant difference, not gigantic. Not only are they getting to the rim less often, they were finishing at 65% clip early in the season. Now they're finishing under 60% clip. That is a huge fall off. That's over a 5% difference in terms of your ability to finish, on top of having a lower frequency. This is significant. Shots at the rim are the highest value shots in the league. No matter how good people get at shooting threes, no matter how much I talk about shooting threes, and we both talk about shooting threes, the reason why we talk about shooting threes is because that helps you get shots at the rim. And guess what? The Knicks are getting fewer shots at the rim, and they're not finishing those shots at the rim. And their transition is not a big difference. So get the spacing right, get 5 shooters on the court, have that identity. We're going to shoot threes. We're going to pull your rim protector away. You will not be able to put a center on one of our shooters, because they will knock down the shot unless, they're going to start doing it on OG Anunoby, but that's another story. That's a story for another day. You have a clear identity. And now when you come with your bench, you have another clear identity. You bring Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson in, and guess what? We're going to get every single rebound. We're going to crash the offensive board like crazy. We're going to run in transition with Josh Hart leading that unit. It solves so many issues to just go, and the fact that you're not trying it, in my opinion, I'm just gonna put my cards on the table. I think that Deuce McBride will be the starter by the time the playoffs start. I've said that early in the season. I maintain that in the middle of the season. I maintain that now at this point, despite my frustration. And I just think we're going through a rocky patch to get there. It doesn't need to be this rocky to get there. It doesn't need to be. This is unnecessary. And I suspect politics and issues internally, organizationally, with cliques and other things going on. And, I don't know. There could be a lot of different things. Human factors, some may say. Regardless, your team is struggling, and this is a time to make a big change like that. And you have a reason for it. You have a reasoning for it. You can justify it, and it makes sense on a million different levels. So just go with it. The last thing I want to say about the lineup, you are more justified in benching Mikal Bridges and playing Josh Hart. If you said Josh Hart needs to start, I don't care. Josh Hart, all I know is that Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart have to start, and everybody else is up in the air. I forget about Jalen Brunson. Josh Hart needs to start. you are more justified in benching Mikal Bridges and starting Deuce McBride than you are to run out the same lineup, because the only thing that doesn't make sense for this team is to run out the same lineup that has played 2,300 times over the past 2 seasons. That's the only thing that's unacceptable. And so if you want to go in a different direction and you need to start Josh Hart, then you're benching Mikal Bridges or you're benching OG Anunoby or whatever it is. But this doing what they're doing right now does not make sense.
Yeah, I've always viewed like synergy and lineup construction from, I use the word a little bit. I've always tried to almost form symbiotic like clusters, if that makes sense. And so the thing you brought up about Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson is such a vital part to it, because we talk about how we're going to maximize these really good players like Brunson and Towns and Anunoby. But guess what? When you put Hart in these positions where he's hurting the other good players unnecessarily, you're not maximizing him either. His impact is being artificially tanked by being put in these lineups, these 4+1 lineups, where Jason Kidd can just have, or Steve Kerr in the Warriors game can just have their best roamers not care about him and not be punished. And that is extremely disappointing from a Knicks fan perspective, because you play a game against the Warriors, the Mavericks, a less talented team, and Jason Kidd is finding major exploits on both ends of the court. He goes at Jalen Brunson like I've never seen. I haven't seen Jalen Brunson get attacked the way the Mavericks were attacking him ever. And there were no counters, no, like it wasn't even in one-on-one. It was off-ball stuff. It was everything. And I'm not saying send the doubles like the way they're doing. I'm saying the Knicks just didn't have any answers at all. It was just like, oh, well, I guess we're just going to keep letting this, like it was just very strange. And then on the other end of the court, actually, you and I pointed out mid-game, there were back-to-back possessions where the Knicks starting lineup worked the ball through good ball movement, through good action, set up a wide open corner three for their starting shooting guard, and a shot was not attempted. 12 seconds of time on the shot clock used to create an open corner three, only for that person to hesitate, pump fake, and then just reset the possession. That doesn't show up anywhere, but that kills your team. These are things that when we talk about passive impact, the only thing that is catching these things are these catch-all metrics. It's not something that people really pay attention to when they're watching, because so much of what we follow is the shot, the active impact. It's obviously not being seen by the box score because no shot was attempted. There was nothing. Somebody else shot the ball in both possessions. But these are things that in the long run just really, really hurt these lineup constructions. And again, I go back to this. It's disappointing for Knicks fans because this season was supposed to represent a departure from that. They were supposed to be the team that saw the mistakes other teams were making and pressed those buttons and exploited the other team's mistakes, not fall back into old routines and get continuously exploited by the opposing coaches. And I think I'm just going to leave this part of the discussion with that thought, because I believe that the league has gotten so talented that at this point we've reached a point where your coach is either getting the most out of his roster or he isn't. And you can look at the teams who are successful and they have the best coaches. And the Knicks, unfortunately, right now are falling into that discussion with the Magic and with the 76ers in the East in terms of, well, if they were maximized, they could be at the top of the conference, but they're not. And again, for all the reasons we talked about in this episode, that's just extremely disappointing.
Great points all around. And I think all of this really brings up the question of, are the Knicks this team that we're seeing, that we've seen of late, the last 11 games or so? Or is this team the team that won the NBA Cup, that dominated the league in, after a little bit of a rocky start from a stretch from November through December? Which team is it? Is it that team? Is it this team? Is it a combination of those two teams somewhere in the middle? And to me, we have to look at a few things. There are always going to be factors involved when you see a drop from a net rating of plus 7.2 to a net rating of minus 7.8. So a 15-point swing in net rating. That can't just happen based on one thing. It can't just be luck. It can't just be players playing poorly. It's a combination of all those things. So a few things jump out at me. One is that the Knicks have gotten fewer wide open threes per game, but not by a ton. And they're shooting nearly around the same percentage on those threes. They've gotten about around the same number of open threes. So that's no defender within 4 to 6 feet of the shooter. They've got about the same number per game. But early in the season, they were shooting 39% on those threes, which is well above average. Now they're shooting 32% on those threes, 31.6. That is a significant drop. And in fact, it is likely an expected decline, maybe not by that much. But that drop should have been expected. Shooting 39% on open threes, on 17.3 open threes per game, was probably not going to hold. Although the Knicks have really, really good shot makers, the way that they're playing right now, it was always unlikely to stay at that level. So some of the shooting decline is normal. Some of the shooting decline is more than you would expect in terms of regression down below the mean. And so there's some shooting luck baked in. I talked about the rim percentage in terms of the amount that they're getting to the rim and how they're finishing at the rim. To me, a big indicator of there's a spacing issue going on right now. They don't play any or very many 5-shooter lineups anymore for some reason. It seems to be Mike Brown has become allergic to 5-shooter lineups, although it was like one of the key tools in his toolbox that was dominating the league. Strategically, tactically, doesn't really make sense to go away from that the way that they could, the way that they did. And that's not going to help those 3-point shooting numbers. That's not going to help those the rim frequency numbers. It's not going to help the rim finishing numbers. Passes, we're talking about passes per game, the style that they played, everybody was excited about. Oh, wow, the ball movement style, this is incredible. Such a big deviation from what we've seen the last few seasons with Brunson ball. Last season, 281.2 passes per game. This season in November, 294.8. Huge uptick in passes per game, getting towards the more closer to the top of the league in terms of passes. Ball movement was great. Player movement was great. Jeff, you touched on like the cutting that they were doing as far as like their efficiency with it, but not as frequently as we would assume given that efficiency. 294.8. December, 283.8. Okay, dropped to pretty similar to what it was in 2025, but pace is up a little bit. Still elevated. Still some more ball movement. January, 279.2 passes per game, down below what it was on average last season. So the ball movement is gone. The ball movement gains that we thought we saw, it is not there anymore. That is a stylistic approach issue. So whether either Mike Brown decided, hey, let's go in a different direction. This is not fair for the Eastern Conference. We don't want to destroy them in this way. We need to chill out. Let's go back to doing what we were doing last season. Let's make it an even playing field. Either he just decided to do that, or there's something internally that's driving them in that direction. These are several places where I'm showing how this is a different team than what it has been, besides just results. There's luck factors, there's decision factors that have happened somewhere here. And then there are player factors. Karl-Anthony Towns. I talked about this on Locked On Knicks previously. Karl-Anthony Towns is shooting 36% on wide open threes this season. Karl-Anthony Towns last season, Jeff, Karl-Anthony Towns last season shot 47% on wide open threes. He is shooting 11% worse. The season prior, Jeff, Karl-Anthony Towns shot 49% on wide open threes. That is a mind-boggling number across an entire season. That is what Steph Curry is shooting on wide open threes this season. And this is Steph Curry's best shooting season on wide open threes since 2019. That is what Karl-Anthony Towns shot 2 seasons ago. That is one of the elite shooters, an elite number, all-time great shooters for at any position to be shooting nearly 50% on wide open threes across an entire season. The previous season, he shot 40% on wide open threes. The previous season from that, he shot 46% on wide open threes. So 3 of the past 4 seasons, he shot at least 46% on wide open threes and at least 40%, which is his worst. This is an all-time great shooter who is now shooting 36% on wide open threes, which is mediocre for the league. That is a problem. If Karl-Anthony Towns is not going to shoot what he is able to shoot, his volume has gone down of late. He doesn't seem confident in his shot. He seems totally out of rhythm and disjointed. He needs to do that. It just has to happen. He has to shoot better. And if there's something wrong with him, either physically, injury, finger injury, I've heard something about, I don't know if that's true at all. If there's something mentally, something personal going on, whatever the case may be, you're not winning if Karl-Anthony Towns is not going to be Karl-Anthony Towns. And I explained who he is, an elite, all-time great, historically great three-point shooter, has been mediocre, mid-average three-point shooter this season. Other issues, Tyler Kolek has fallen off a cliff. Teams are bringing on-ball pressure to him like crazy, and they've, I guess, figured out this is the way to slow him down and stop him. He's struggling. Jordan Clarkson is borderline unplayable. Geoff, you and I talked about it before we jumped on. Jordan Clarkson basically can't be in the rotation anymore at this point. We talked about OG. We talked about the Hart stuff. All of these things combined, there's never just one thing when you see a 15-point net rating swing for the same team from in the same season, from like month to month. You don't see that unless there are a huge number of things going on. These are just some of the things. Geoff, you can talk about any of those that you want or go in a completely different direction, but I just wanted to cite a bunch of things that I think are major contributors to what we're seeing in front of us.
No, it's a ton of good information. And I just have to say that Towns is combining his worst three-point shooting season ever, arguably, with his worst rim attempt season ever. He's shooting 50% at the rim, 16th percentile. This is a 7-footer, super skilled, combines, for his
57%,
position.
57%, but yeah.
Yeah, 16th percentile is what I said.
Yeah. You're right.
He's combining, quickness and strength that few can match, and the dude seemingly just can't make a shot. Part of it is I think the whistle thing is just getting into his head at this point. Like, I think he can't believe how few free throws he shoots every night. And he's just determined, like, if I just keep going to the well, they'll eventually start calling fouls. And I thought you made a great point about he has to either start shooting more until he figures out how to be himself again. Or if that's not possible, he has to sit out for a little bit, because as currently constructed, this team has a championship ceiling, but they have to actually be the best versions of themselves. That's what we've been saying all along. And right now, is a single player the best version of themselves? Like, I can't think of any player who, Deuce McBride, I guess. But like, Deuce McBride is, I would say that if you looked at the top-down metrics, something you pointed out to me a few weeks ago, like, he's probably being helped quite a bit by shooting numbers that won't sustain. And that's not disrespect to Deuce McBride. That's just, he was shooting out of this world. He was shooting, God, what was you told me some data point that was insane. It was like he was shooting a higher percentage on contested threes than open threes.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like, okay, like, that's impossible to keep up. So if even Deuce McBride's overall impact is artificially inflated right now due to unsustainable shooting, what New York Knicks player is the best version of themselves? You can't maximize nobody. The goal is to maximize everybody. And you made so many good points in that monologue you just gave, but it's just, they have to figure out stylistically how to get back to a point where all these players are getting theirs routinely, a part of the puzzle. And to be honest, that starts with the coach, and maybe a little bit it starts with your best player. I'm not going to say like, oh, the Jalen Brunson conversation is coming, but it's not like Brunson can just absorb none of this. Brunson's a part of this too, even though he's been hurt for a couple games. They were struggling before he got hurt, and this Mavericks game was not good. Like, it's not like some people would have you believe that Brunson's just kind of an innocent bystander who is trying to drag this bad team. No, this is, again, a should-be championship contender. And of course, there are people, everybody bears a little bit of the blame, and if they can't be fully maximized, the coach is going to bear the brunt of the blame. But the guy who holds the ball more than any other player in the league, whose touches per second are quietly creeping back to what last season's numbers looked like, he's going to bear some of the blame too if it keeps up like this. I don't think it will, but that conversation is probably one that's going to happen.
I definitely want to touch on this because I think that there's at least a contingent of Knicks fans and analysts and watchers who think that, and I talked about the passing numbers and the way that the offensive approach has changed. And there may be some perception that it's like a result of Brunson being like, you know what, I'm going back to hero ball. I'm going back to, I miss Tibbs. I'm tired of this Mike Brown guy. I'm going to start doing what I do best and be damned what happens to the results of the team. And well, I think there's a ton of blame to go around for Jalen Brunson in terms of just like, he really hasn't played great. In a couple of the 2 wins that they have in the last stretch were his 2 actually good games that he's played really well. And he has not played well. But I do want to touch on the thing about like his particular role in the offensive approach and stagnation. So when we talk about seconds per touch, we kind of just are talking about, we're trying to get a proxy for ball domination. Like when you have the ball, when the ball goes to you, are you a black hole with it? Do you just have it every time, or are you distributing it around? How long is it lingering with you? And in 2025, last season, Jalen Brunson's seconds per touch were 5.92 seconds per touch. It's really long. It's a long time to be like, you have the ball before somebody else gets their hands on it. In November of this season, it dropped down to 5.14. This is a huge plummet in terms of, even like, point guards are always going to have high seconds per touch. They're bringing the ball up the court. That's going to skew it. When they get the ball, they're generally running, if they're running offense, running plays, running isolations, this all is going to skew seconds per touch. 4.4 going from 5.92 to 5.14 is a huge drop. Dribbles per touch. That means it's not just holding the ball, waiting for, set things up, but you're like dribbling, you're trying to make moves, you're creating something for yourself or for others. It was 6.02, which is a crazy number last season. Dropped all the way to 4.83 in November. These are precipitous drops. This is a gigantic change in terms of Jalen Brunson's approach, being off the ball more, getting off the ball quicker. In December, we see it climb back up, 5.4, very close, a lot closer to the 5.92 that it was last season. Dribbles per touch, 5 seconds. So it's climbing up, not to the point of what it was last season. In this most recent stretch, 2-5 stretch, Jalen Brunson missed 2 of these games. In January, seconds per touch, 5.21. It went down from what it was in December. Dribbles per touch, 4.9, went down from what it was in December. Overall touches, I'm just looking at overall touches. So how often this guy has the ball per game, is just touching the ball per game. In 2025, it was 86.8. In November, it was 89.6. So it actually was higher. In 2026, December, it was 96.9, which is an insane number. And in January, it was 76.3. That's the lowest of all those numbers that I read. Their records were 9-6, 10-3, and 2-5. I don't see a strong correlation in terms of the Knicks' performance and success based on these numbers. And so while I think a lot of the blame is at Jalen Brunson in terms of how he's played, I don't think this ball dominant kind of narrative is accurate with respect to the numbers that we see, with respect to what we see on the court. I think there are other things going on. Stylistically, they've clearly changed in terms of their ball movement approach, but I don't think it lays all at the feet of Jalen Brunson. He's a contributor, absolutely, but it just seems like they've gone in a different direction, and I don't have a clear explanation for why. That reason is really the question and the story to me.
So you think that, yeah, you caught me off guard a little bit there, just with your conclusion. I guess I shouldn't be, because per usual, like most things, we talked about it a little bit. We talked about it a bunch over the months. So first of all, what's the sample of January games that he's played? Where his
5.
And then what is I would want to look at if we were going to do a true comparison, well, first of all, I'm sure you'd agree. I'd want the sample to be a lot bigger before I was like drawing super serious conclusions off that. But also,
sorry, just to interject, the games where they're really like the stretch where they're playing so poorly, where their net rating is really, really low, is this small sample of games. It's a small sample. It's 2 and 9. It's 11 games. It's a small sample regardless. And in a big chunk of those games, at least half of those games that Jalen Brunson has been involved in, he's not been dominating the ball. Like that's what we have. We have small samples, and in those small sample, in a small sample of that small sample, he's not dominating the ball anywhere near what he was last season, and in fact, less than he was when they were actually winning.
Yeah, the other question I would have is because you're right, the Knicks have struggled, but they've struggled recently because of their defense, right? So
their offense has gotten worse by a greater number than their defense has. In from the start to December 31st, their offensive rating was 123 points per 100. Their offensive rating in the last 11 games is 113 per 100. They dropped by 10 points. It just happens to be that their offense was so good, they didn't drop in terms of their position in the league by as much, but they dropped by 10 points offensively, and they only dropped by 5 points defensively.
So I have a couple of questions for you about this then. What was your, circling back to the start of this conversation, I know we want to close up here in a couple of minutes, so I'll leave you with the last word because I think the viewers would be really interested.
We can go over because I think it's an important conversation. So yeah,
just regarding the whole coaching and tactical conversation in terms of the Knicks in 24-25 were doing things one way, right? Like, and we had many conversations about how whether it was the lineup construction or the way certain players were deployed, this wasn't the best version of the Knicks, or we didn't think it was. We weren't, obviously we don't know, but we didn't think it was the best version of the Knicks. And specifically related to Jalen Brunson, we talked about passing. We talked about his touches and how much he commanded the ball. And you said numerous times that like, this isn't Brunson just like going rogue. This is deployment from the coach. And this is, you know, if he is asked to do something different, he will adapt because that's players are more malleable than we give them credit for. So I guess my question to you is, it sounds like given the conclusion you drew, you actually do believe that not only was Tom Thibodeau optimally deploying Jalen Brunson, but the whole team, because it was built around his best skill. Is that wrong?
No, that's entirely wrong. I don't think that at all. I think that
I guess I'm confused then.
Yeah, I'm even confused at how you drew that conclusion. So I think that what I shared was that the Knicks last season, Jalen Brunson was dominating the ball much more than he has at any point this season across all the stretches combined, individually, by month, and any section of the, like, he was dominating the ball much more last season, right? We agree on that.
Yes, we agree on that. Sorry, Mike offs.
So then they played really, really well, both when he was touching it and handling it a little bit more and a little bit less. Yeah. I don't think that, but none of that indicates that they were optimally deploying Jalen Brunson last season. They were a better team this season. I believe they've been a better team up until this stretch. So how are you drawing the conclusion?
So I thought where you were going with that though, is that the January stretch kind of proved that anyone who thinks that Brunson shouldn't be commanding the ball, shouldn't be holding it a lot, shouldn't be playing what some people on Twitter have called Brunson ball, they're wrong. And I thought that's the conclusion you were.
Oh, no. That's not what I'm concluding at all. All I'm saying is that I don't think the correlation is there in terms of Brunson is handling the ball more, having the ball more, dominating the ball more, and thusly that's why the Knicks offense has degraded so much over this point in time. That's my only conclusion, is that I don't think there's evidence to support that conclusion. I'm not drawing a conclusion towards a positive direction.
Oh, okay. So, but if it were up to you, what would, I hate putting you in this corner because I don't think
I'm good.
I don't, but I also just, in a macro sense, I don't think that you should need to have an answer to be able to criticize something else. I'm a firm believer in that. So, but anyways, let's just, to finish the conversation, what do you think from a Jalen Brunson perspective, from a Knicks offense perspective, how do they sort of toe the line there? Because we've talked about Brunson's passing. You can fall anywhere on the spectrum with Brunson's passing, but I think everybody would agree that as a passer, he's not, in the Luka Doncic, Tyrese Halliburton, Cade Cunningham sphere. He's a little bit more limited. So we're talking about, getting Towns to the spots that he needs to get in. Like when we're talking about things like that with OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson, Deuce McBride, we're talking about getting all these guys going at once. We are talking about somebody that needs to be more than just an elite scorer. They need to be somewhat of a floor general. So how do you make that happen with Jalen Brunson at the head of the snake without saying, okay, we're just gonna put the ball in your hands more, or doing the opposite and saying we're gonna take the ball out of your hands and you just we're gonna emphasize your off ball impact a little bit more?
I think that the way that Jalen Brunson has been deployed when this team was humming offensively, I think is basically the closest to optimal that Jalen Brunson can possibly be deployed in a team in which he's not sucking his impact away from his teammates. So I think he's already been essentially optimally deployed. Like he had his second highest offensive impact in his career. I think for him to have his personal highest offensive impact, he would then have to start sucking away from his teammates' impact, and it would just be like he's dominating the ball, and everything that's good that happens as a result of what he creates. Other than that, I think the way that he had been deployed earlier in the season and like moving towards mid-December was sort of the optimal deployment. That said, he has the ball less often in this more recent stretch. For less periods of time, for shorter periods of time than he did at that point in time. And so all I'm saying is that I don't believe statistically there's any correlation with their performance with how often he's had the ball, whether he's dominated the ball too much or anything like that. I don't think that's happening, but I think we've already seen his ideal deployment. I think there's other things happening. I have not looked into seconds per touch or, dribbles per touch or overall touches for all of the other players on the team. And I think that there are other things happening that are going on that is correlating actually with the precipitous drop in ball movement from month to month, but it doesn't correlate with Jalen Brunson having the ball in his hands.
Yeah, I think that's a good conclusion to draw based on the data, even if again it is a little bit small sample size, but like you said, it's all we have right now.
That's just my feeling. Like I can't say that definitively that's the case, but that's my feeling. Yeah.
It sounds like maybe from Brunson's perspective, they sort of took the lever a little bit too far in the other direction, and maybe to balance it out, run things through him a little bit more and see how that goes to get the offense closer to where it was going. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, I to be honest with you, my sense is that it's not really that lever is not really what's that's not really causing the issues right now. Like whether it's like too much Brunson or not enough Brunson, I don't even think that that's like really what's happening right now. I think he's like off ball. I think whether it's 5.4, 5.2, 5.1 seconds per touch, or it's 5 dribbles per touch, or it's I think all of that is fine. It's all in the realm of fine. It's about like what else is happening with the offense when they have 5 shooters. Like who's creating the offense? Is it Towns at the top making passes to cutters with a empty rim protector, or is it like Josh Hart that's generating a lot of it depends to me, but I don't think it's like all my point is like I don't think like this what's happening right now is a result of Jalen Brunson either over dribbling or not having the ball enough or having the ball too much. I don't really think, to me, based on all the data that I've seen, there's probably like 12 to 15 other reasons that would come ahead of that in terms of likelihood to like cause what we're seeing right now from the Knicks.
Yeah, I guess as he comes back from injury, we'll just have to monitor the situation. I thought this Mavericks game was one of the worst games I've seen him play, just from an approach standpoint. I thought that, but like he's coming back from injury, so I think, and also, I I thought the Mavericks had a really good game plan in terms of ways to load up on him effectively. That's something he just can't control, really. So this goes back to the conversations we had last season, which just, I mean, if I was a listener and I was a Knicks fan, that would just be, again, so frustrating. It feels like we're in the Twilight Zone, just going over these things over and over again, trying to make it more palatable for Brunson to be his best self with Towns and finding ways to do that. And the Knicks just, for whatever reason, don't seem interested in it.
Yeah. And I would say the way to do that is, again, I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. If you're listening at this point, we love you because this is deep into the episode. And, you definitely are, we very much appreciate you, but I would say, I really don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And that's the big question mark to me. And that's the thing that we're always going to have a black box to, and we're going to get drips and drabs of reports here and there. We know there's or we have a sense there's culture issues or issues internally, but I don't know why the Knicks have moved away from the approach that they have early on. I don't know if it's a particular player has complained about it. Maybe it is Jalen Brunson. It would be really weird, but it's not really correlating in terms of he's not having the ball more often. And so I don't, it doesn't really make sense to me. And so whatever's happening internally is driving a lot of these things that we're seeing the results of, but not seeing the causes of very clearly. But we're seeing a lot of results that we can point to. What we don't know is the causes, and that's just going to just always be mysterious. And so I believe and my conclusion that I'll draw, the last thing I'll say about just the Knicks in general, is that I believe we're going to, as mysteriously as they've been suddenly really bad, they're going to mysteriously suddenly be really good. And we're not going to have a clear reason for it. Guys are going to start playing better. Karl-Anthony Towns is going to rediscover, oh, wait a second, I'm one of the greatest shooters in the history of the game, and start shooting the ball better. And guys are just, OG Anunoby is going to remember how to shoot as well. And they're just going to play better, and we're not going to really know why. That is what I expect to happen. And that's something that we'll just have to see.
Also, to leave Knicks fans with a glimmer of hope, as XJ opened the show with, there's one thing we know about this Knicks team. Is that the lineup that they keep throwing out there as the starting lineup does not correlate with the ceiling of this team. So, in a weird way, if the Knicks were going to go through a shooting funk, it's probably best to happen now so that people who are more prone to just being results-oriented over a short sample size are going to overreact to what could just be poor shooting. The Knicks lineup, when we talk about this lineup of Brunson, Hart, Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Towns, it's important to remember that we're talking about it relative to what the Knicks can produce. It's still a good lineup. It's 5 really good basketball players who should win more often than not. So it's not like this Mavericks thing, the thing that just happened against the Mavericks is actually the norm or actually reflective of who they are as a lineup. They're a mediocre lineup relative to what they can put out and relative to, their place in the league. But my point is that if they had positive shooting luck with this lineup, oh man, that would just reinforce them that this lineup can work and can take them all the way, or gives them the best chance of going all the way. So in a weird way, it could be better for them to fast forward getting to the part where maybe we need to go in a different direction. So as backwards as that sounds, that could be one glimmer of hope in terms of XJ saying, oh, the team's just going to randomly turn it around. I do think one of the most important things that can help lead to a turnaround is putting better lineups out there, putting Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson together more of the time, putting Karl-Anthony Towns when he's playing center with 4 shooters more. I think that these are things that will correlate with success at the highest level for the Knicks.
Yeah, and I honestly think that's probably the point of the episode, which is that in terms of the results kind of oriented mindset, it could not come at a better time for them to kind of have all these struggles. And some people who are trying to parse the signal and the noise say, hey, well, the signal is this lineup's playing and they ain't playing well, so should get it out of here. So even if that is not necessarily accurate, like you said, I don't think this lineup is a +2 points per 100 lineup. I think it's probably what it was last season for because it played for 2,000 possessions. In that case, we're still probably, hopefully, ideally going to get a change, and that can start to help generate a turnaround. Any last thoughts before we get out of here, Geoff?
No, we're just preparing for our free agency episode. So this was the gauntlet. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed diving back into Knicks verse. If you made it this far, I don't know. We always get cool people to show up and say the word that we say, but I don't know what the theme of this episode is. So
I don't want to say inevitable, but
you can say now. You can say inevitable. I can take it.
Yeah, it's just funny. That's super, because it'll be a super inside hot hand theory joke. If you're listening to this, then please drop an inevitable, just so we know who you are, and we can tell you that we appreciate you. But yeah, lots here and lots to continue to come. Don't get too down. We went on a lot of rants in this episode, but there are good things to come for this team. I believe they will turn it around, at least to some extent. They're not going to be this bad. And looking forward to continuing to covering the team as they move on. And we'll trace back and see maybe some of the stuff that I said today was completely wrong, and we'll find out that it was soon. So looking forward to that. And for Geoff, I'm XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.